Hello everyone, welcome to this episode in our Criminal Justice Reform series. I'm James Milan. Today I am with Cassandra Bensahih, who currently is involved with Massachusetts Against Solitary Confinement, and we'll be talking about the work of that group. But she also has both a personal history and now a professional history of years of dedication to reform efforts that we hope are finding shape in the Massachusetts legislature in this year, 2018. We'll be talking about that as well. First of all, I just want to thank you, Cassandra, for coming and joining us today. We appreciate the fact that you've traveled all the way from Worcester, I think,
yes,
to be here, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you,
Thanks
James.
for joining us. If you can just tell our audience, tell me and tell our audience a little bit about your own personal story that has brought you to the place that you are today.
Well, James, thank you for having me. So I always highlight the fact that I'm a member of the post-incarcerated community. Through substance abuse, through trauma, my resilience has brought me to the position of being a leader in the community. I found that, things happen in our lives as we grow up in certain areas, things that are beyond our control. For me, it just happened that my substance abuse led me to a prison sentence. It wouldn't be the punishment that I would have chosen for myself as a parent. I had 4 daughters in my custody. I wasn't able to provide for them by being sent to prison. Today I'm a supporter of the Primary Caretakers Bill, Senate Bill 770. Had I been allowed to heal with my daughters in a program of rehabilitation, I wouldn't have gotten a 10-year felony record. My daughters wouldn't have been sentenced to the Department of Social Services and been put in foster care. It creates a whole realm of trauma for the whole family. You carry this stigma for 10 years. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to get housing. It took 3 years to get my daughters back into my life. That whole thing that's created, all of that collateral damage, 10 years is a long, long time. I'm still there, So I became a leader in the community, and with that, I get to use my voice to change some things. I get to use my voice to speak for people who don't have a voice, who can't speak for themselves. But when you do that, you have to be able to say the things that you think they would say if they could speak. So that becomes your burden.
Yeah, that's a serious responsibility, right?
Yeah.
To speak for those similarly situated, but yours is the voice that can be heard.
Yes. And you hear so many stories, but when you hear those stories, it gives you the inspiration to keep going. It also shows you that your story is not the worst one out there. So you keep pushing forward, you keep fighting for change because it's necessary. And the fact that you've been there, that's what wells up inside of you. That's what brings the empathy. That's what brings the feeling, the passion, That's what makes the fight real.
Yeah, and as you said, you've been inside. How long did you serve?
Yeah, that's the thing. I had a 1-year sentence, and because of the plea bargaining that happens when you go to court, I was able to plead to something that I didn't do, and I was able to cut that in half and get out. But again, that created more collateral damage.
Well, I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's very illustrative for people to understand that even 6 months.
Yeah.
We've spoken to some other folks through this series who have indicated to us that even a night or two spent in jail can derail a life that already is, a tough one from the outset. So again, you were there inside for 6 months.
Yes.
You emerged. and you've been dealing with it for 10 years,
Yeah.
for the consequences for 10 years since. What was it like when you first came out of prison and for your own reentry back into society? How did that go?
It was surreal because I did not know what to do, you know? I had no housing. I had no plan. I had no resources, you know, and I had no one to show me the way.
And there were no reentry programs to help you either?
They gave me nothing, you know, no guidance. You know, I turned to my family. You know, they were young. You know, I became a burden to my family. So I looked into what there was out there. I actually sought out churches, you know, to ask if there was anything that I could do. I found substance abuse homes, you know, programs, reentry programs there for women that had substance abuse problems. And I started out with one, you know, and due to the shame that you carry for where you're coming from and what you had done, that was a struggle. It took me 3 years to get my footing, you know? Mm-hmm. I refused to really face what I had done and where I was coming from. So it took a while to really kind of settle into, you're not a bad person. You're not a failure. You can make it. And when that finally settled in, through some of the programs that I entered, I was able to really get a grip on, okay, this is who you are. You are strong. You're a mother. You're gonna make it, you know? And things started sinking in. I found a program in the community that was called ACMi, and it was for ex-prisoners. And in that program, there were some really good leaders there at the time. They told me that my story could help change some laws, and we started advocating for those laws to change. It was run by Stephen O'Neill at the time, and there were leaders like Delia Vega there, and they took me under their wings. They developed me as a leader, and I learned how to forget about where I came from, who I used to be, and I learned to turn away from self and look towards helping others. That changed my mindset. I forgot about what it was I had done, and I started focusing on what I could do, and I changed, you know?
Yeah, so I just want to interject that ACMi that you just mentioned, ex-prisoners and prisoners organizing for community action?
Ex-prisoners organizing for community advancement.
Advancement,
yes.
Excuse me, for organizing for community advancement. We did have a chance to speak to a couple of people who have been followed the same route as you with ACMi. Basically came in, perhaps as ex-prisoners, also whose stories were very compelling and who have since, you know, I don't want to say turn their lives around, but it has become the central focus of their lives and energy. Yeah. It's clearly an organization that is absolutely vital to the people who are involved with it and to whom it provides services. But I'm thinking, yes, it's wonderful that you, in the end, found your way there. But what you describe in the initial time and years of your coming back out of prison again sounds to me, again, like it's another example of an individual's resilience, in this case for you, without there being systemic or programmatic supports for you to help you to do that. You needed to find your way really on your own, with the help of your family, of course, but through all of what you've just described, this self-laceration, right? This beating up of yourself over, oh, I have this to feel bad about and that. You had to overcome all that, and again, more or less on your own.
Yeah.
Sounds to me, though, that what you're doing now and what you're involved with and the work more generally that's happening now is trying to ensure that people like yourself or in situations like that are going to come out and have somebody that they can turn to
Yeah.
in case they don't have the strength and resilience that you clearly found in yourself.
What we think today is that inside of the criminal justice system, there needs to be a direction for reentry when people leave, before they leave. There needs to be direction to programs that are on the outside. I don't know I'm not with EPICA anymore. I don't know what their mission statement is today, but there are organizations out there that have this leadership development. There are organizations out there that do have reentry, the process, but it needs to start on the inside. People need to have direction when they come home. Someone less resilient or less focused when they come home will go back to their old ways, end up back in substance abuse, back in a self-destructive mode. And they may make it right back through the system again, because there's that revolving door of the criminal justice system that we feel is intentional. You come out, you go back, and it keeps going around and around. So what is it that we want to put in place? There's got to be more than just going into the system and coming home to nothing. We have to create something for people to leave with, where they have something to look forward to that's going to hold them in the community, to a life that's going to be something that's going to build something to build on, you know? So there's got to be programs, there's got to be treatment, there's got to be more inside before they leave, you know?
So, yeah. We're going to have a chance, I think, to talk about that a little bit more, but you mentioned the experience inside. And one of the things I do want to ask you about is the fact that in this series, we have noticed from the people that we've talked to that the situation involves problems and challenges, and the situation, by situation I mean mass incarceration here in Massachusetts, involves problems on the front end, in other words, with bail, with mandatory minimums, with systemic reasons why some people are much more vulnerable to being incarcerated and to ending up in that pipeline. So that's at the outset. And then we've also alluded to and talked so far today about the problems on emerging from there as well.
Yes.
But one thing that has been mentioned various times in the series, but we haven't concentrated on too much yet, is the experience while you're inside. Right. And as you were just saying, one of the things you want to do is prepare people when they are about to emerge, prepare them in some way with materials, with information, with resources that they're going to be able to use on the outside. But I'd like to put that aside for a second and focus on your current work. So right now, as I mentioned at the outset, the work that you're doing is with Massachusetts Against Solitary Confinement.
Yes, thank you.
Solitary confinement is a big, big issue that's part of the criminal justice reform legislation going through the State House now. And in general, it's a big problem, I understand. So tell us a little bit about the work that MASC is doing, M-A-S-C is doing,
yes,
and what the situation is with solitary confinement here in Massachusetts, because I think people may find it surprising or even shocking.
Thank you. So yes, today I am the coordinator for MASC, which is Massachusetts Against Solitary Confinement. This group was created about a year ago. It's made up of a coalition of a lot of great organizations across Massachusetts. ACLU is part of it, the Prison Legal Services, UMass Action, GBIO, Black and Pink, GLAD, and there's several others. League of Women Voters. We feel that there needs to be some real changes in the way solitary is administered in Massachusetts. Right now, Massachusetts is one of the few states that can still hold a person in solitary for up to 10 years.
And therein the shocking, I have to say, that's what I was referring to, and I was absolutely shocked to read that. 10 years.
Yes. So the problem is the House versus the Senate bill. There's some stuff that we like more, like 15 days limit on solitary confinement. There's no oversight in this in the vulnerable population is being subject or placed in solitary, like the LGBTQ population, pregnant women or handicapped people. We feel they should not be placed in solitary. We want to remind people that the punishment phase will most likely, these people will be returned to the community. We know that the larger conversation is that punishment has never, ever changed a person's behavior, okay? Since the 80s, we've tried to arrest our way out of our public health problems, okay? You cannot cure a substance abuse problem by locking people up. They have to have treatment. Mental health issues, the behavior can't be changed by locking people up. You have to treat the root of the problem. The only thing that has ever happened by locking people up like that is that we've increased our prison population 5-fold. And then when these people have to come home, we've created a public safety issue. No treatment, these people come back to the community, citizens that are damaged, and now we've got them in the community, and what do we do?
And I can only assume, I can only assume that what you're saying about how punishment doesn't work in that way is only exacerbated by, made much worse by solitary confinement.
Yes.
Because again, whether you're talking about substance abuse, mental health issues, or just the opportunity to kind of reflect and engage with other people about and take responsibility for what one has done, all of those seem to me to be much harder if you're in isolation.
Yeah. And isolation just sits you there and stares you in the face and leaves you all alone, You're not treating the problem, you're not making that better, you're not getting to the root of why this person did what they did, and you're not dealing with it, There's no way to earn your way back. There's no way to get out of that sentence once you've been given it. And there's also no oversight in the way people are being held. Those cameras, I think there should be cameras all through the prisons. What is it that we're hiding? Why can't those conditions be watched? The guards, the way the prisons are held and treated, it should all be filmed.
Let me ask you, how do people end up in solitary confinement?
I think there are different reasons, and I'm sure that they're not following all those reasons. I'm sure there's rules and regulations on how you get into solitary, but from the things that we hear, it can almost be any reason. Talking back, passing notes.
So it's kind of at the discretion of particular prison officials in a given institution?
We think so. From the stories we hear, it seems that that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. Or you can be held there until you're held until it's proven that you should be there,
Is that right? So before it has been proven that there's a reason for you to be there, you're already there awaiting that decision. That decision.
So it's just, there needs to be some oversight. Someone needs to be watching those that are watching those prisoners, There's some type of accountability that needs to be put in place. We pulled together this coalition, and we work with Jobs Not Jails to end long-term solitary, to make sure that we're reforming these old draconian laws and policies that continue to make our community members that are trapped in these systems have a way to earn their way back into the community, to have a way to be able to be assessed if they have mental health illnesses, to see the therapist, to be able to deal with what it is that they're dealing with. If you're there and no one asks you why you're there or what happened to you, how are they ever going to make sure that it's going to get better? you know? So we want to deal with the public safety issues. We want to make sure that our neighbors are going to be safe when people come home. We want to make sure that our vulnerable populations are safe, that they're not treated like the worst of the prisoners, you know? I think that the administrative part of segregation, if someone's going to be protected, they shouldn't be treated as if they're done something wrong and locked in segregation like that.
So what you're just referring to is the fact that sometimes the justification that will be offered for somebody going into either segregated population or solitary confinement in a prison is for his or her own safety?
Yes.
So that's a certain percentage of the cases that's the argument that's made.
Yeah. And it also looks like it's a form of discrimination too, because 70% are minorities that are being held in solitary. You know, those numbers are crazy. You know, why is that? You know? So
for MASK, for the organization itself, is really the bulk of the work that you're doing right now kind of advocating for and doing your best to have an impact on the legislation that is going through as part of the omnibus bill?
Yes, yes. We want the strongest reforms for solitary to come out of this bill. You know, we want to do away with long-term solitary. We want to make sure that people are being assessed, their mental health assessments are being done. We don't want people held in solitary for up to 10 years. We want them to be, you know, to make sure that people are being treated as human beings and that they're getting everything they need to be better, especially when they come home. We don't want to see people released from solitary right to the community.
Does that happen very much?
It happens. We don't know how much, but it does happen. We have people that have told us that they've come home from DDU. Which is the long-term solitary, 4 years in solitary, you know, and then previous to being in solitary, they're released and sent home. So this is something that we have to look into, and it has to be, there has to be a step down. There has to be, people need to be prepared to come home with some type of services, you know. We're looking for vocational services. If you're in administrative segregation, you should be earning good time. You should be getting vocational services. You should be treated like the other population because you're not in segregation for punishment, or you're not in segregation because you've done something wrong. Why should you be treated as such?
Yeah, it's a real, it's hard to reconcile, right, those two ideas. One, hey, we're going to put you over here, separate you out from everybody else for your own good and for your own safety. Oh, and by the way, in doing so, you're not going to have access to any of the, you know, constructive programs that other people do. That just doesn't add up at all.
Yeah. And if you're punishing a person too, how do you know if they're getting better if they have no way to gauge that? How do you know if they've reformed their behavior if you give them a sentence and they can't show that they're doing better? You know, how does that work?
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to there too, or what you're mentioning is something we've talked to others about, which is the importance of data-driven and evidence-based kind of programs and solutions, right? Because a lot of the time, and I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine the numbers in terms of solitary confinement would also indicate that this is not an effective way of getting to the targets that we all have.
Right.
Even that prison administrators and policymakers have. This is just not working in that way, and the numbers show that.
Right.
That's what I imagine, you know, is one of the arrows in your quiver. One of the things that you have for ammunition is that, right?
Yes. What is your end result? What is it that you're going for with this, other than punishment? And we call it corrections, you know. So I think that's probably where I'm going with this. You know, reform is really needed.
Well, as we speak, the omnibus bill that we're talking about is, on the cusp of actually becoming reality, from what we can tell. We're speaking in spring of 2018 right now. And what do you hope to see? I know you've mentioned that you really want to, that MASC is advocating for reduction of long-term or elimination of long-term solitary confinement and other measures. What do you hope for more generally from the legislation? And then what's on the other side? Once it comes out, what will you be moving on to next, yourself and also MASC?
Well, I don't know that we've worked on that yet, and at least not to talk about yet.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
we're really hoping for some real a comprehensive bill to come out. If we could look at the models that have been done in other states, we're hoping to see a real change in the way people are treated in solitary. Doing away with long-term solitary, giving people the services that they need, the mental health assessments that they need, the substance abuse treatments that they need, keeping the data, some real accountability to the system, to see some real changes. I think that it would change both sides. The treatment that the guards are getting from the inmates, the treatment that I think the whole system would get better in the long run. I know that it all takes time, but I think that it would make it better for everybody. If everyone is treated humanely, I think you get back the same treatment you give, you're getting back,
And you know how that feels, I assume, right?
Yeah.
From both sides.
Just from being inside, if you're treated like a human being with respect, you respect those. I remember there were guards that treated you a certain way, and you immediately built a certain respect for them. There were guards that treated you another way, and you immediately built a certain ill feeling towards them. So it's just human nature, You want to build a good relationship with people, and you want to treat them like you would be treated. And then you have smooth running of the whole place. No one wants to be treated badly,
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the people that you're interacting with as a prisoner on a daily basis, including the guards, including those who are free to leave at the end of the day, have issues as well that need to be addressed. I mean, again, like you're saying, they're going to dictate the tone. Therefore, you want to be able to support people who are doing that job, so that they are able to, not feel put upon, endangered, embittered, et cetera, and then taking it out on the prison population, which again works into a very bad spiral.
That's right. Yeah. So we want to make the whole system better,
Let us
and
hope.
you start with changing policies and having accountability, having eyes on them. If everybody knows that they're being watched, they may do a better job.
I wanted to ask you about solitary confinement. People watching and others may think, well, there must be some reasons for people, good reasons for people to go to solitary confinement. Are there?
Well, I'm sure there are reasons to separate people from the population. Say, people kill people, people harm others, they're dangerous, they're causing a problem. In that case, okay, so we separate them from the population. But how long do we do that? How do we address the issue? How do we fix the issue? Can you imagine taking a person out of the population, placing them in a 6x8 cell, 23 hours a day, no contact, one guy told me it took him 6 months to get a book to read. Either the lights are left on all day, 1 hour out. Sometimes they don't even get that hour out. Who could even imagine being locked away like that for 10 years, up to 10 years or more?
Yeah, I have to say, you could take a healthy person, you know, a by the books person, et cetera, put them in those kinds of conditions, and you're going to end up with a basket case, I would think, at least.
You're going to lose your mind. You know, I read something one time that says segregation harms one physically, but it also scars the soul. It just takes you lose your mind. I think about it and it just bothers me inside, you know? I don't know how we justify going to sleep at night knowing that a person is being kept like that. How is there no way that we can think about that person earning their way back? All you can hear is what's going on around you. How can we not reach out to that person to find out if they need any care, if they can reach out to their family, if they're better, if they're sorry? You know, why don't we just give them the death sentence? How long do you keep a person like that? You know? How do we keep from becoming the beast that we've locked up? How do we not care? It's just, it can't be the solution.
Yeah.
You know, it just can't be.
Yeah, there are studies and other evidence that would indicate that kind of isolation is part of a torture protocol, practically. Yeah. I mean, again, you're talking about how bad would a person have to behave in order to justify society's treating them in the way that you've just described.
Right.
It's unfathomable.
And now that it's in place, we talk about the overuse and the misuse. So for what it was created for, now you're using it for all kinds of things. So that's when it's out of hand. That's when you need the oversight. What are you using it for now? You asked me earlier, what does it take to get there? What are they? What does it take? You know, we're hearing all kinds of reasons that people are being placed in solitary. I'm sure it's not being done by the book, you know, so we need to look into that. You just can't lock people up for whatever you feel.
Yeah, and as you said, oversight is huge because you just can't leave it up to the discretion of other humans with the same kinds of weaknesses and the same kinds of, you know, they may be having a bad day or whatever, and we can't just allow, I assume, responsibility for, you know, this kind of treatment of somebody to be instigated because somebody, you know, because a prison official is
feeling some kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's
I think not.
Very, you know, a very intractable issue among many in terms of criminal justice reform. Yeah. And as you already mentioned, there are reasons to be hopeful about the current legislation being considered. Let us hope, indeed, that it comes out in the form that you're anticipating, that we're anticipating.
Yes.
And that we have reason to celebrate that,
yes.
But also, more importantly, it begins to play out through the system.
Right on.
So that people don't end up in the situation you've well described.
We're already hearing stories of all the suicides that are happening in solitary. The conditions are so bad, people don't want to live like that, you know. No one should have to take their life because they've been sentenced to solitary confinement.
Yeah, and as you already alluded to, there's a hypothetical question out there that is, what could be crueler than capital punishment, than the death penalty? Well, maybe exactly this.
Being buried alive.
Doing.
Yeah, being buried alive.
Yeah.
For years and years.
Definitely gives us all pause, I would hope.
Yes.
So we'll keep our fingers crossed about that. I just want to finish up, though, with a couple of more personal questions again, just returning to some of the things that you spoke about earlier. And one of the questions that arose when you were talking was, you described your own journey and that, again, that resilience and focus that you found in yourself as you navigated those years when you first got out of prison, is that teachable? Can you impart anything to others to help them to access that part of themselves, or is that really a journey that each person has to find his or her own way on?
That's a good question. I don't know that resilience, I think it could be teachable. It could be part of leadership development. You know, there was a point in my life that I did not know that I was resilient. And because there were great leaders in my life, I took a training one time, a Black leadership training called BOLD, Black Leadership Development Training. They were brilliant. They were brilliant Black leaders, young. They brought me back from a place that I had went to. And there was political education, there was Black education. It reminded me of where I came from. I had to be reminded that once upon a time in my life, I idolized people like Angela Davis. I was Black and I was proud. There were things that I wanted to do. There were things I wanted to be a part of. I had to remember who I was before I slipped into the darkness. But I had to be led there. And I had to be willing. I had to be willing to come alive again. I had to be willing to do something other than for me. Because substance abuse can be a selfish thing. If you are willing to live a better life, if you're willing to show up for life, and sometimes that's hard, you know? Sometimes that's hard to get up when you have nothing to get up for. Even if you have something to get up for, family is not even enough to push you to do the right thing. You have to dig real deep inside to say, I want to live. I want to do more. And you put one foot in front of the other in a day at a time. And it just starts getting better. It starts feeling better because you have to develop new habits. And you start feeling better. But it starts inside of you. And once you start feeling better, because you're doing something different, people start responding to you differently, and the world that you're around and the community starts embracing you, because it's a hard thing when the community doesn't embrace you. But it depends on what you're doing and who you're around. And once they start, you start feeling better, you grow, you know? But you gotta be in a community of love. You gotta be in a community of acceptance. Because it's a real cruel world out there when you're branded with certain brands. The criminal record, you know, where you come from. If you just step out there in the world and start filling out applications and looking for housing and jobs and getting rejections, you don't feel so good about yourself, you know? You can surround yourself around people in the community that are doing the work that you're doing or thinking like you're thinking, and all of a sudden you don't feel alone. So you have to seek out those places that are doing community stuff, and those communities of love will embrace you, and you'll start feeling like you're not alone, you know, because they're out there. But you have to look for people. And that's key. Looking for organizations that are doing work around criminal justice or working with people that are formerly incarcerated or mothers that have been incarcerated. When I was inside, there was AIM. And those were mothers after incarceration and different things like that. And they can tell you, you know, that you're okay. You're not alone. You're not the first person who's messed up your life, you know. You can get back on track. And it's really important that you don't feel like you're the worst of the worst.
And also to meet people, like you said, at that point in your life, who are a little bit further ahead.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and who have been where you
Kinda
are,
show you
and
the
they're a little
way.
further ahead.
Yeah.
So you know you can get there too.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you mentioned that you had 4 daughters. I have
Yes.
four daughters. What is it that what are they learning from you? What can they learn from you? What do you want them to learn from your own journey?
I think that every day I get up every day and I try to do the best job I can do. I try to be the best I can be so that my daughters know. I'm sorry, I get emotional because there's a lot of damage to some of my daughters. Some of them are doing wonderful. I have one that's a nurse. I have 2 others that are doing really good. They do the best they can do. But because of my past, there's a lot of wreckage for them. You know, they have a lot of trauma. I want them to know that no matter what is in your life today, you can overcome anything. All you have to do is put one foot in front of the other and walk through it. And you'll come out on the other side to the best life that you can ever imagine. Look at what I've done. Look at what I do. Use your voice. Speak up for yourself. Build relationships with good people, people who care about you and know how much I love you. I tell them to love people, to have empathy, to rise above the ugliness.
Thank you very much for sharing that and for being here in general. And we do very much appreciate it. And I know your daughters, as hard as it has been for them and for you through all these years, I have no doubt that they have much to look up to aspire to be inspired by, as the rest of us are as well. So,
thank you.
I am James Milan. This has been the Criminal Justice Reform, or this is the Criminal Justice Reform series, and we hope for you to join us for a future episode. Thanks very much.